Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring podcast. Today, we're returning to Tennessee, which I don't think we've been to in at least a couple of months, maybe half a year at this point. And we're talking about Blue Note bourbon and Blue Note rye for that matter. Blue Note has been around for a couple of years now. We've got Logan Welk, president and COO, to join us now. I almost said CEO, but I know
Yep.
that's you've
It's
moved
fine.
on from
That's
that.
Chris.
That's Chris now. So we've got Logan Welk on to talk about Blue Note, to talk how it came to be, what the new products are. The particular product that spurred this interview is the 2025 release of the Blue Note Honey Rye Cask. So we'll certainly talk about that. And in true Whiskey Ring fashion, we'll cross other things off the list as we go. So Logan, welcome on.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being on. And like you said, Tennessee, we've luckily made the turn towards fall, so it's finally not 1,000 degrees down here.
We're up in New York, and we just hit that about 2 weeks ago, where it wasn't we didn't have to use the AC anymore, and it was a glorious day. So,
Exactly.
so before I ask the origin story, I feel like I missed this part, but when did you join the company?
Yeah, so I came on in 2019, early 2019, when the brand was just in Memphis. And interestingly, it was CFO was my original role, then COO, then president, and sort of got my fingers in every aspect at this point.
Gotcha. So this was, I'll let you go into the origin story. This was just after the original business that you guys had nothing really to do with had folded vodka business and
Correct.
was being redesigned.
Yeah,
So,
which I mean, might as well just kind of jump into that. It's a pretty good
oh,
segue. So,
yeah.
the original licensure of this business goes back to 2014. Back then, it was a vodka distillery. Ultimately, it was one of the earliest people to go into really grain to glass vodka. And unfortunately for them, they found some of the negatives associated with the cost structures of that, as well as really just some of the limitations in Memphis around distilling products. But anyways, that business ultimately went under approximately 2017 is when they closed up. And then around 2018, this company's licensure sort of had new life. So it was acquired by a group of investors who knew they didn't want to be in vodka, but didn't really know exactly what they wanted to do. And it was kind of funny looking back, talking to a lot of the guys back then during some of my interview process. The thing they kept saying over and over was, we don't want to be in the brand side of the business.
Hmm.
And yet, so often they talked about the branded side of the business. So it's like, okay, we understand the financial aspects. We don't necessarily want to go there, but it's that intriguing component. But they did what they said they were going to do. They didn't get into the branded side of the business, at least early on. They focused on more of the stuff behind the scenes. So our warehouse where I'm located right now is 29,000 square feet. We've got another 80,000 square feet down the street. But they stepped into a facility that has full federal state licensure. And what can you do with that? Well, what they discovered was behind the scenes, there's this massive trade of bulk barrels. So they worked with the largest liquor brokers in the world, people that generally no individual would ever interact with. You stored products for brands that people are more familiar with, like Constellation, Diageo. A lot of the Diageo produced product out of Tullahoma, George Dickel, was housed in our warehouses that went to the third parties. High West products went through our facility. Other brands like Barrel Craft Bourbon, we housed all their inventory. Other podcasts, so Bourbon Pursuit,
Mhm.
their original inventory and blending was all done here. So all that sort of happened in this nondescript 29,000 square foot warehouse, and ultimately ended up growing that to where we'd ship to now at this point around 125 plus DSPs across the US. So back in 2019, 2020, we were seeing everybody from the small scale startups to some of the large scales of trading inventory back and forth. And we served as that intermediary to sometimes disappear the touch points between distilleries that had reasons to not necessarily want to engage in business directly.
Mhm.
Um, but ultimately, that brand idea kept creeping up in the background. By early 2019, when I came on, Blue Note as a brand was launched just in Memphis. And soon after that, we had expanded to Georgia and a couple other locations across the Southeast. But even then, none of that product is what exists today. That was all product that was sourced through our warehouse here, but as products that link back ultimately to George Dickel produced items. But interestingly enough, not all of those were items that ultimately went into a George Dickel product. So the fun thing about Diageo is their R&D is at such a massive scale that they may do large scale production runs that never make it into a bottle. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just doesn't necessarily align to a product that they're looking for. So our original ryes were combinations of ryes that didn't necessarily ever make it to a glass under their brand. We had mash bills and entry proofs that never went into a George Dickel product. And I think that was the first entrance into seeing, like, you may have an existing brand on the shelf, but what can you do to the product to make those nuances where it ultimately tastes so completely different that people don't necessarily recognize it. And it's not a bad thing, but a lot of people associate George Dickel with his like Flintstone vitamin profile, and they were tasting ours, and it wasn't coming through. And like one of the things that we weren't doing that was benefiting was ultimately no chill filtration. So you're getting a lot of those fuel oils that carry through, protect the palate, and ultimately some of the higher proof points and things we were doing, ultimately we're ending up with a very different product in the glass. But one of the things I always look back at that time was how different the market was 2019 versus 2020 versus today. And I will always remember this. We had 15, 16-year-old product, cast strength single barrels to ship to a market, and it was going to land at like $59.
Mm.
And the feedback from the market was, we can't sell a product that expensive. No one is interested in a 15, 16-year-old single barrel at that price. Like literally, if you went 6 months later, everyone would have been, oh my gosh, of course we'll take an age-stated product like that. But then, no, not really interested. And it was just kind of cool to see what continued over the next few years, how dramatically things changed. But that was the early days, at least.
Yeah, the single bar market itself is the episode that'll come out previous to this interview was with Jay West.
Yeah.
So we spoke about single bars and how that exploded during COVID and shortly after COVID. So absolutely. And we'll mention a couple of things that you touched upon. So the 9, the 17-year-old stuff you had initially putting you on the map, the ability to grow to the about 110,000 square feet total that you've got now. But I wanted to take it back for a second to, you said the previous company, Pyramid Vodka, it was, so the licensure was purchased, taken over by this group of investors. So it sounds like they weren't necessarily interested in a distillery.
Yep.
We're interested in spirits. So would you say they came at it from more of an entrepreneurial perspective as opposed to a production perspective?
It was, I would say, a very business perspective. So a lot of the backgrounds of the individuals involved were either banking, finance, and legal, and definitely not hands-on from a production standpoint. So from that perspective, it was, they didn't have the expertise to step into the production side, but they also had the financial acumen to know there was massive capital outlays associated with it, and not necessarily an environment in Memphis that was beneficial to actually set that up. You also had the realities that if you are a startup company in Memphis, Tennessee, it's not like you walk down the street and you've got master distillers lined up. To get people to come here from Kentucky, which was pretty much the predominant source at the time, still is to a large extent today, it would have been a very hard sell of, we don't really know what we're going to do. We don't have any of the equipment. We're not really sure where you're going to be fitting into this and trying to make that work. So it was really analyzing a lot of other brands and looking at the landscape of, I mean, Bulleit's a great example. They were originally in the sourcing game, and then at scale you get into production. I think with some economics today, some of those decisions may be accelerated or pushed back, but it is interesting to see how distillation was never on the table for this company in those early days.
Yeah, that was something that it piqued my interest because you had said earlier this year on This Is My Bourbon podcast that one of the reasons that the original group walked away from the still, because there was a still there to still vodka, was that there wasn't really local expertise. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, I hear what you're saying. There's not a ton of distilling happening in Memphis. I think at that point, Old Dominic would have been around, but
Hadn't even
they were,
started yet.
yeah, they hadn't even started. Yeah, they were young. So I don't think they would I don't think they would take offense to saying that they didn't have the expertise yet at that point.
Yep.
Could say that, you know.
Yep.
And I say that knowing that like Alex Castle has been a
Yeah.
guest on here, and it, I hear what you're saying. You would have had to import someone into an
Yep.
uncertain situation, and with the demand at that point for these people to be moving around, not many were moving around.
Yep. Well, I mean, and I
Recognized.
think Alex is a great example too. So old Dominic and the Canales had been in the alcohol business. Like their
Mhm.
family was in the alcohol business. So it wasn't a completely foreign concept to have like connections throughout. Whereas this group of people, they had never touched anything in the alcohol industry. This was day one. We've stepped into this licensure. Let's figure it out. And I think that's why, among some other reasons, like it really did make sense that they were able to connect with Alex and really get things going at Old Dominic when they did.
Yeah, I mean that was a great interview, and it happened like I just remember the interview went live like a week before it was announced that she was leaving to go to
Yeah.
Augusta. Uh, so it was good timing from this perspective, I guess.
Yep. Interesting
Um,
timing from her
interesting time.
perspective.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Um, it would turn out that wasn't the first interview or it might have been the first, but it wasn't the last interview I did with someone who like 2 weeks later was in a different job.
Oh
That's
yeah, it
totally fine.
happens in this industry.
Yeah. Um, so I guess the last question on the kind of founding story that I
Yep,
think about is I would imagine that at the time that this group of investors was looking to purchase a property, ideally that already had licensure, so you take that part out of the equation.
yep,
Um, there, in addition to there not being a lot of local expertise, there just weren't a lot of local spots available like the one that you're in that
yep,
had the licensure, had the equipment, should you choose to use it,
yep,
or had the room for it. Um, Today, and we'll talk about this a little more. You talk about the microclimate being super important, the reputation of Memphis for having terrible roads, and the importance of where you are
yep.
to get around that. Um, do you get the sense that this was all kind of serendipitous, that there was a place available, they found it, and it was in a good location, or would they have continued to look had they decided, this just isn't a good, doesn't feel like a good place to
I
do
will
this?
say not just this place, but so many factors in this company's history. Like you would never have chosen the way stuff played out, but it all just kind of makes sense and is built into our story. Um, So what's interesting is one of the original individuals back when it was a vodka company, their family had spent a long period of time looking for facilities that would work. And they had spent extensive research going all over Memphis, and they ultimately settled on this location. So to some extent, the hard part of finding the location was already done. And that individual actually carried over for a period of time into Blue Note. And it was kind of interesting some of those ideas of getting into the third party storage business and some of those connections he brought with him. And that's one of the things that I don't think even he recognized how much his carryover really did bring to this business. But yeah, I mean, if you were just looking for a random piece of ground in Memphis, this is probably not where you would have ended up. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Nobody in Memphis really stumbles across us. We're at the end of a dead end street. It is kind of fun where you see people show up and they're like, "Are we in the right spot?" It's like, you are. But from a tourism perspective, from a foot traffic perspective, nothing about that is where we're at today.
Right. Like so it sounds not super far from the city, but it's far enough you can't just walk there like you could
Correct.
some of the urban distilleries in like Louisville or even um well Nashville not so much, but trying to think. I
Yeah,
don't think there's
it's
anything in downtown Nashville.
well, it creates benefits, but it also creates some of those like complexities of it's like we do have a tasting room, but it's basically industry only or like super like isolated type of groups that come here.
Sure.
But the benefit of that is for like true production,
Mhm.
we're out of the way and we don't have any neighbors to worry about. The fire department loves us. There's all
Mhm.
these other big things from a commercial perspective. We can line trucks up and down the street and nobody has any issues with it. So it's like production, what we're doing, sort of behind the scenes stuff is great. Public facing, not so much.
Like I said, you don't need that. You don't have to do distillery
Yeah.
tours
Yep.
of going in between the equipment. You don't have to deal with you're dealing with flammable liquid still, but
Yes.
you're not putting it on an open flame
Yep.
or
Exactly.
heat source.
Yep.
So as I said, the fire department probably loves you for being a lot easier in that respect.
Well, that when you stack enough barrels in a building, either way, they're looking at what you're doing.
Right. But let's say knock wood, it's a lot less likely to catch fire than a still is.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
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 Um, all right. So with that foundation set, let's talk about the microclimate a little bit. So you're north of Memphis, and you have this pocket of land
Yeah.
that is it's more humid, it has more temperature variation, and has great airflow due to the
Yeah.
confluence of the rivers.
Yeah.
You've related a story that when you drive to work in the morning that it'll drop 5 degrees
Yeah.
when you cross a certain boundary near the
Yeah.
location. um, I was thinking about this, and this question can refer to both your own product that you're blending, so stuff that's Blue Note branded, but also the stuff that you were aging for other people. Do you find that different products, so let's even just do bourbon and rye, uh, are affected differently by this change of microclimate?
Yeah. So I'll say between the bourbon and the rye, I wouldn't see that dramatic of a difference between them. I mean, ultimately, rye tends to age a little bit faster on its own,
Mhm.
but as a whole, our aging is going to be, I would say, materially different than, say, a Kentucky or even somewhere else within the South. And you kind of alluded to the story I've told 40 million times too many of, like, just this little bubble. And it really is a small bubble. It's about a mile around us. And it once again gets back to you have never chosen this location, but all these things you kind of find out after the fact. And I always say it's marketing as truth and ultimately becomes part of your story. Is it impacting the product? And when it starts to impact the product is when it actually becomes pretty cool. So, like you said, yeah, Mississippi's to our west, Wolf River directly to our north, and we are just down from where the elevation changes. So you get a little bit of wind just because that elevation change. Plus, you've got a cleaner line of sight towards the river, so just airflow is a whole lot cleaner and moves through. But what we discovered versus leaving in Kentucky is even though we don't heat our warehouses, we're aging for almost a full 12 months out of the year. And for us, that's been pretty incredible to see that impact across the products. And even I will say this, the stuff that we were storing for third parties and may have been bottled under another brand, um, some of those products at the time that we were bottling them were the highest scored products in Tennessee ever. And it was kind of cool to see how this X, Y, and Z companies had access to this product for 50 plus years. They never got it. It comes here, lives its life, and you're starting to pop these one-off benefits associated with it.
Mhm.
But part of that too is like we get the temperature change throughout the day, which isn't going to have a huge impact, but it's nice to have that clean, cool air come in over the night. You can
Mhm.
roll up all your doors and all that comes in. You're building the heat throughout the afternoon. The thing that people, I think, lose sight of with humidity is it's not just what it does from like angel share perspective, but it's what it's actually doing with the combination of the heat and the ability for that barrel to build so much more pressure. Because you're sealing those wood, the porosity in the wood so much better
Mhm.
for longer, you get so much deeper penetration of that oak than you normally would. So, like, even a 3-year-old barrel for us, that red line is pushing 3/4 of the way through the barrel already. And you get to 4, 5, 6 plus, you're getting full stave extraction, which is really crazy to see from that young of product. But yeah, it's been interesting to see all these temperature variations and things play out, especially in the liquid.
Sure. And I know, I forget which interview it was. You mentioned that you somewhat quantified you get like an additional 2 months or so of aging per year.
Yeah,
But it,
so this
yeah,
is
so
where that's actually changed. This was what we were estimating. And then we went back and we looked at all of our dump logs and we're looking at the temperature of the liquid throughout all of the season. And it is literally down to weeks that you are not actively building pressure inside that barrel. we're lucky enough that we actually do bottom out. So you're pulling that core back really good, but it quickly turns as you head towards spring and are right back up actively aging. And I mean, our liquid temperatures are in the mid 90s. And one thing I always point out to people is 120 proof alcohol's flash point's only 70 degrees, which is why airflow is super important.
Yes. Uh, with the aging almost the entire year, so
Yep.
that's you're not. I guess you're not getting below about 50 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit or
Yeah.
something.
We only touch into the 40s for an extremely short period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can imagine you're. I know you haven't had this for a number of years, such that you'd have, I would think, too much over oaked R&D product quite yet, but um, that having that nearly year long
Yeah.
wood interaction as opposed to some periods of pausing for pure oxidation not just ages it faster, but do you find you have to really keep an eye on the barrels too so that you're not over oaking them?
Yeah. So I will say the benefit so far for a lot of the products that we have is because we're distilling with Green River, you don't have like 10, 15-year-old product that you have to worry about. But when we're doing the third party storage, you had people talk about, okay, it's great, you're not going to be evaporating a lot. That's great for the older cooperage. But your point of you are pushing so much oak into it. And what we did see of some of our 17-year releases that we aged up to 20 is that oakiness, like normally you expect over oaked by the time you're 20, super over oaked. And it is kind of crazy to see how much you are driving that oak profile in those especially older ones that have been sitting here.
So I guess what we're saying is that probably in 15 to 20 years we'll not be seeing 15 to 20-year blue note that
My
is Green River distillate.
Yeah, my guess is that we will be tasting at 10 years and determining if we were going to keep pushing. Like theoretically, some people's taste profiles are really looking for that, and obviously the volumes come down, so maybe that's what people are looking for at the time. But it is going to be really interesting as we get into those upper age expressions if we want to really be hitting those, or if we want to be putting them on stainless or dumping for younger products and blending it.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So
Ultimately, those are years out. We haven't seen it yet, but it is one of those things that's in the back of our mind of you got to look for it.
very true.
Yep.
So moving to Tennessee as a place to age,
Yep.
this was likely not part of the discussion for the vodka company because it's vodka, you don't usually age it, but Tennessee has several advantages for you over Kentucky.
Yeah.
The number one being the tax structure for taxing barrel storage. So
Yep.
I'd love you to explain that a little bit for the audience and ask how you're able to kind of take advantage of the fact you've got the behemoth in the
Yep.
state with a strong hand in lobbying.
Well, that's what's so amazing is you've got Jack Daniels, who at one point in time they did try to implement a property tax on barrels in Tennessee, and Jack Daniels was very quick to get that one. Well, I say quick; they got it shut down. And that's what's kind of remarkable is Kentucky. You see the phase out starting to roll in now, but to have that disparity between Tennessee and Kentucky was pretty remarkable. But yeah, for us, so our barrels live in Kentucky for the first year and a day, so we are subject to tax up there. But after that, it moves to Memphis, and there's no longer any tax exposure on the barrels until you go to the dump stage, and then you're obviously going to pay federal excise tax, and then just go down the line of all the other taxes. But yeah, for us, it is a meaningful savings, especially when you start to get into larger quantities of barrels stored on site.
For sure. And you're with the, as you said, with the volume that you're dealing with, but also in keeping the price for the consumer down.
Yeah, yep,
It,
it all helps.
it all helps. So with the year and a day requirement,
Yep.
uh, that allows you to say it is Kentucky bourbon.
Yep. So there's a couple of pieces behind that. The first is you get to call it Kentucky bourbon anywhere in the world. Whether we stress it or not, right now that's not overly stressed as a part of our product. Maybe over time that becomes a little bit more so. From a lending profile, our last few years, Kentucky bourbon has a whole lot more value than something from, call it, an Ohio and Indiana, Missouri, or any of the other locations. So ultimately, for a company that's growing, you're storing up theoretically decades of inventory on your balance sheet that's just sitting there, aging and evaporating. So you tend to debt finance those aspects of your business. And the more value inherently with it, the more banks ultimately like it.
Gotcha. So in addition to that, not having to pay the um, battle tax while aging after it's moved down to Tennessee, are there other advantages that you found or benefits that you have from? It could be from Jack Daniels or otherwise, but I just feel like it's by default is because Jack Daniels said this wasn't a good thing.
So I mean, it's not necessarily a direct result of Jack Daniels, but I'll say it is amazing the things you find that you are somehow exempt from that everybody would think, oh no, there's something associated with it. So one of the things I always talk about is bourbon barrels do not exist in the International Fire Code. You would think, okay, you've got, yeah, that's people always are confused
Um,
by that.
I literally just
It's,
turned my head for this. That
yep, an
yeah,
alcohol filled wooden vessel does not exist in the International Fire Code. That's not by accident.
yeah,
So,
bet, I bet.
yep. So for us, like when we sprinkle our buildings, that is purely for us and our insurance. There is no fire marshal, there is no anything actively involved in the enforcement side. They'll obviously come through your facility and they're like, I mean, everything looks great, but it is not a requirement with barrels. Another fun fact is you put 90 barrels on a tractor trailer, you ship that all over the US. There's nothing hazmat about that. You take that one drop of bourbon, put it in something else, put it in a tractor trailer, hazmat load.
Hmm.
It's just remarkable the amount of lobbying protection that goes into place. And like a person outside of Kentucky, you wouldn't realize a tractor trailer's got 45,000 pounds of bourbon barrels sitting next to you because there's literally no placards. It's not even necessarily a specialty permit for the driver. It is pretty amazing, some of the stuff that exists that people don't necessarily imagine when so many other aspects of this business are so regulated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right in Kentucky, especially if you're in kind of the triangle of northern Kentucky.
Yep.
You just assume the tanker next to you has bourbon in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yep. Yeah. So
but
like you put it in the tanker, yes, that is a hazmat load, specialty placards, everything. Keep it in the barrels, you're good.
right, even I mean, even then though, in Kentucky, I feel like you just
You
assume
know it.
that,
Yep.
yeah, unless it's like open top or something.
Well, exactly. Especially the
Yeah,
trucks have been around long enough. You got the black fungus growing on them. You could tell.
exactly. I've seen a couple of Four
Those
Roses trucks
drivers
come
that,
on.
yeah,
Yeah,
they've timed their lights perfectly. They fly through those back roads like nothing. Yep, they're
yep,
loaded with barrels.
yep. Scare the crap out of the consumer drivers or the
Exactly.
um, not consumer driver. What's the word that I'm looking for there? Just non-truck drivers. Let's say
Yep.
that. All right. So uh, the next question I have is, you've said before that, before bringing on Chris Crosby, he was brought
Yep.
on as VP of Sales. He's now
Yep.
CEO. Before bringing on Chris, the team didn't really have industry experience. It's a small team right now. I think you're about 20 folks or so.
Yeah.
Um, so I took that to mean industry experience or lack thereof of both sales and production wise. So was that the case? And you know, how did you build out? Well, let's start there. Like, was that the
Yep.
case that you really had to build everything from scratch there?
Yeah, so I mean, the early days, even our sales force didn't have any industry experience. At this point, our sales force is all industry veterans. Our production side, with the exception of now one person who's recent, did not have any industry experience. And like a lot of the people that work in our production ops crews may have been like ancillary in different parts, so like bartenders in the service side of the industry.
Mhm.
But ultimately, no, they never had any distillery operations, any exposure to large scale food and beverage manufacturing, anything remotely like that. And it was really amazing to see so many people willing to learn on the job. And really for us, it was looking at some of that leftover equipment that Pyramid Vodka had and transitioning it to usable for us. And it is funny walking around and like somebody from the industry would look at it and be like, that's not what that was intended for at all. And it's like, no, we know, but we've made it work. And ultimately, we've learned to do things in a different way that we found to actually be pretty beneficial in the overall production of the product, and also just some of our operational efficiencies too. And like, it's not that we didn't make failures. We've certainly screwed up some stuff over the years, but we didn't have that background to follow the tried and true. Like,
Mhm.
everything was you could learn and then fix after the fact, especially as we were growing and some of those nuances that came up along the way.
So we mentioned, the initial releases of the really high age bourbons.
Yep.
Again, put you on the map. It was something that got people's attention, but you did have to follow relatively soon after with available, consistent, and consistently available
Yep.
product. Um, as of, just as a couple of awards throughout here, as of last year, you've now won double platinum at the Ascots. And with all due respect to Fred, you've done even better at San Francisco,
Yep.
where in 2024, two of the six available double platinum awards went to Blue Note.
Yep.
Um, Going from the this starting team where you didn't have any industry experience, sales or production, to that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, how did how did the company go about the build out of learning to blend, learning to taste, learning to figure out what was good and what was going to go together? And was that just like
Yeah.
learning on the job, or did you import people to help
No.
teach?
So I will say the early products that don't exist in any fashion today, there was some of the trying to get from industry veterans. There was a Scotch blending expert who did some blends early on that don't exist in any format today. Everything that exists today, absolutely everything was done in-house. It wasn't master blenders. It wasn't anything. The biggest certification we can all point to is in the early days, we all got our Stave and Thief Bourbon Steward certifications. That was it. There was no formal training in tasting or blending. Um, and I think part of that is why our products are kind of as cool as they are. We've sort of refined the process now, but it's still a pretty open group of who's involved in tasting products, and you get really candid feedback, especially as you're rotating different people. And what I mean by that is, like where I am right now upstairs, we've got CFO, we've got other individuals in ops, and whoever's up here on the day, if we're tasting something, they're tasting it as well, or at least they're eligible to taste it.
Mm.
And it's if somebody's out on vacation, they may not taste it. So it's just kind of that rotation through. But it is really remarkable how really from 2021 forward there was such, I would say, major shift in our products, and the awards really shot up for stuff that was at that point exclusively within our control, as opposed to just picking someone else's product that had been predominantly aged somewhere else and then just bottled here.
Gotcha. And the I guess along with that is you guys do slow proofing, which is one of my favorite things in the industry. I go back to, I didn't know about this before interviewing Santa Fe Spirits. And for me, it makes a big difference in the whiskeys. I
Yep.
love the uncut, don't get me wrong. But
Yep.
when it comes to kind of the more everyday drinker, having learned on the job, who taught you to slow proof?
I mean, everything is on the job. And I will say the caveat on the job is you're lucky enough in this industry to talk to people and be able to just access information. Like, people ask, oh, what do you read? It's not one thing, it's kind of an everything, as long as you're open to it and experimenting with it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's simple stuff of being on tours and looking at how like the big distillers, they're backfilling their barrels, filling with water, recapturing those extra proof gallons, using that as proofing water. Like, all of those things, it's not that anyone ever said, oh, maybe we should do this. You just kind of see it, you pick up on it, whereas maybe somebody else doesn't realize what's going on right in front of them. But yeah, I mean, the slow proofing is just kind of getting back to the basics of alcohol and water, hydrophobic properties. If you slam them together, it's a harsh interaction. It's the longer you can stretch that interaction out, ultimately, the more symbiotic that relationship is.
Mm.
Ultimately, we think that ends up in a smoother product. And it's just kind of an interesting phenomenon that not everybody does. It takes longer. You have to pay more attention with what you're doing, but at our scale, it's something that we feel very proud to be doing.
Again, I'm a big fan. I know it does make a difference. I think it's right up there with the chill filter versus non-chill
Yeah.
filter debate for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it leads to a lot of the same uh, textures and outcomes by doing
Yeah.
it. You add water too
Well,
fast, you got the heat interactions breaking down the alcohols,
yeah.
and you get different flavors than you wanted.
Well, that's what I love about all the marketing around chill filtration is just another great way to enjoy the product. It's like drink them side by side, telling which one's better. You probably
Yeah.
aren't choosing the chill filtered one. And that's what's so fascinating is somebody will drink 100 proof, 120 proof, stand it up next to an 80 proof they're used to that's chill filtered. And just that ethanol comes through so strong in chill filtered products that they're like, oh, the burn, the burn. And they don't experience it on something that's non chill filtered, but 30 proof points higher. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's all just allowing what naturally occurs in the barrel to go through to your glass. And that's the
Yeah.
fun part that I think gets not enough attention is if you simply allow what's naturally occurring to go through and not mess with it or to screw it up, chances are you're probably going to have something pretty good.
Yeah. Taking out all those oils and fats and
Yep.
compounds that are going to coat your tongue and not
Yep.
make it burn so much.
Yep.
I fully agree. So, to it's this is a weird way to for me to do this. Usually, I would put the questions about awards more towards the end, but because it was such a
Okay.
foundational point in or rather inflection point in Blue Note's history,
Yep.
I wanted to ask up more up front. So, mentioning the awards I already mentioned, you guys are well awarded,
Yes.
but not of every and all award shows out there. It
Yep.
seems to have been pretty deliberate as to which ones you entered, the higher quality ones, objectively speaking.
Yep.
What goes into the decision for you guys to enter a show or to pass? Because, and I ask this because for some producers, distilleries, clearly it costs money, it costs
Yeah.
product to do that. But while that's not unlimited by any means for you guys, it doesn't seem like that's as much of an obstacle as it would be for a smaller producer.
Right. I would say that would be more so in the early days. You had those basic financial limitations. Now we've expanded up, but it's still anybody can get an award anywhere. That's sort of the sad reality is if you want an award, you could even create your own award and be the only submission. There's plenty of companies that do that if you dig into it. But it's if you want it to be beneficial, then your distributor needs to care, the retailer needs to care, and the consumer needs to care. And there are just a handful of awards that can check those boxes. And for us, that's been the focus is if you can get to that level of true blind tasting where you don't have a lot of these outside influencing factors, um, I think that's where those awards should be held at a substantially higher level than sort of the noise that's out there. And that's why for us, San Francisco has gotten the level of attention it has. And there's been other awards added on over the years. But I mean, at this point, I think we're 9-time double gold winner at San Francisco, 2-time platinum winner at San Francisco. And it's like our products have been around since 2021. And to have that sort of pedigree stacked up, and the thing I point out about platinum is it's like, okay, whether you care about San Francisco, you care about 30 plus people blind tasting or not, it's the pattern of doing it year after year after year on the exact same SKU across how many different batches that aligned to that outcome. And I think what's really important for us too is it's literally just pulling bottles that a person could buy off the shelf. It comes off our bottling line and it goes out. It's not from a closet. And like one of the other things too is like our uncut SKU that got number 7 in the world. That was literally got the request, walked down to the bottling line that day, they shipped the product off. Whoever's barrels, whoever's blends those were, that's what got rated. And I think that's been what's so cool for so many consumers is they're not buying a bottle and completely shocked because there is a lot of stuff that might have the award, but when you actually taste it, it's pretty disappointing. For this, it's like, oh, I can see why it got that award. And I didn't have to lay out a bunch of money to do it. That's the other rare thing too.
It's yeah, it's very it's usually cherry picked. Um,
Yes.
the quote unquote
Yeah.
best barrels and things like that.
Yeah.
But so when you've gotten these, the top of the top awards at the top shows, um, clearly, you're coming up with new products, so there's always new things to enter. But
Yeah.
once you've won double platinum at San Francisco, do you keep entering, or
So,
do
so
you?
for us, yeah, the decision was like, I mean, there's not really much better we can do. So you kind of just let that one sit. I mean, what's fascinating, you look in this industry, there's people still touting their double goals from San Francisco from a decade ago from major brands. So it's like once you've achieved that, I think it's as long as you're maintaining that consistency as a company and the consumers can see that consistency, I don't know that it makes sense to keep doing it year after year after year. Like it does cost money to submit this stuff, especially as you get into some of our limited time offerings that are $250+ a bottle. It adds up because it's not just the one that gets tasted, it's a whole number of bottles that go with it. Um, but yeah, I think that's where once you have your base built from the rewards perspective, and then you can have all these LTOs, these additional add-ons that also check those same awards criteria. At some point, people just have enough confidence that, okay, across the entire portfolio, something is going to check the box for me. And it's checked the box for so many people that it's worth a flyer.
Makes sense to me.
Yep.
So speaking of I think it's a great transition to the next question, which is this idea of creating a baseline trust with the consumer, that
Yeah.
whether it's through rewards, whether it's through their tasting, that they can see other products that maybe don't have a hang tag on them and still be like, all right, I think this is gonna meet my palate. You said, and it's I'm quoting you, while innovation drives the marketplace, you also need a core range that will stand on its own.
Yep.
Um,
I don't know when
and
I said that, but it sounds right.
yeah, I can probably find that, but that's all right.
Yeah,
The
it's fine.
it was it. I can tell you it was in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So it makes sense to me. Like there's really only been one producer, and it was a recent interview that I've had on that was outright like, we're not doing a core range.
Mhm.
And shout out to uh, Holyrood in England, and that, sorry, not England, in Edinburgh, and but that's their thing. Like they're going to
Yeah.
experiment with each single release, and they're not going to have that. Similarly, I did ask someone recently if they were going to have a core profile, even though they weren't producing their own stuff. Like a lot of it was more single barrel as opposed
Yeah.
to blending. So when Blue Note is really starting, so let's say, like, I know production was more 2018, 19, but really starting to get products out there. So 2021.
Yeah.
Um, it, how quickly did you guys land on what that core profile and core range were going to be for your bourbons and your ryes?
Yeah. So what's interesting, it was sort of the finance side of it played into it is what price point should we have to achieve X number of volume? So you start with that. You start to look at all the products you have access to. You back into the age ranges, and you come up with some of those early blends. But I think one of the big driving forces behind why we were so focused on having that core as opposed to just these one-off LTOs was if you want to actually be a brand, you have to be visible to multiple types of consumers. And like the more consumers you can get in front of, the better. Part of that is you have to have stability on the shelf. If you exist and you are gone a month later because your one time interesting release sold out, well, that's another spot that somebody's stepping into. And for us, it's incredibly important if you look at retail space, maintaining your shelf position and that shelf space is incredibly important. The same thing is if you want to live or die in the on premise, if you've got a product that's created once and is something different later, good luck ever finding a menu. No one's ever going to print your name on it 65 times in a year. So you need a base level of consistency. You also need a consistency in the profile itself so that a consumer is not shocked, like, why did I like it yesterday and I hate it tomorrow? Well, it's because it's something that's completely different. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just two very different approaches. And we saw the benefit of you've got your everyday consistent ones, and then you can throw out these limited time offerings on top of it for the people that are seeking those one-off iterations.
And even from those, so we have a couple of breakoffs from the core range. So Crossroads, being
Yep.
French oak finished, and we'll get to that one. Of course, the honey cask rye that
Yep.
we both got in front of us. Um, you mentioned earlier Green River being your distilling partner.
Yep.
helps a lot with that because you have that core range that people will likely be able to, if they had enough of your products, to say, all right, this is Blue Run, excuse me, Blue Note. I was hoping I wasn't going to do that, and it just slipped out.
You're
Um,
fine.
so Blue Note,
We're a quarter of the price. We're fine.
yeah, exactly. Uh, so for Blue Note, people are going to try it, and even if they have Crossroads and the Honey Cask, I found this that you could tell that it was a Blue Note core. Like I, having tasted the bourbon and the rye before the uncut, that you could taste that there was a connection point. It wasn't a
Yeah,
total departure or something that was
yeah,
meant to be a total departure.
yeah.
Um, with the let's take the yeah let's take the honey cask first. Sending them. So the honey casks are quite limited.
Yeah.
I think on this bottle it said this was 3 casks that were given to an apiary and then refilled afterwards for a finishing period. And so that's not a lot. And I know you've said also previously the honey releases have been so well received
Yeah.
that it will be an annual summer release, not a year round, but a summer release.
Perfect.
Um, I feel like you're going to have to do more than 3 barrels though. So,
Yeah,
uh,
we've scaled up that production a bit. The initial year was 2, then we scaled up more. Next year there'll even be more capacity, and that's one of the things too is trying to figure out what that sweet spot is for having enough, but not having a limited time offering that is 40 million cases. And like I think that's the interesting thing to have seen the shift over the last year or so is brands that were focused on those limited time offerings now pushing what they're calling an LTO out that quite literally is 20,000 cases on its own. And it's like, well, if you're calling yourself craft and you're pushing out 20,000 case LTOs, you stepped into a different level. And it also kind of changes the consumer of if they were looking for that product and they were lucky enough to find it, and now it's on every single shelf 4 cases deep in every liquor store across the US. It's just kind of a different buying experience, a different consumer that tries to switch into that. But getting back to the honey, I mean, it was the initial launches were just in Memphis and Nashville, and that was really sort of R&D. Like, is this thing viable? And that was several years ago. And the response was absolutely yes, it is very viable. Um, and then it was kind of over time scaling, trying to figure out exactly how we wanted to scale this one, and then figuring out the timelines because it's not a overnight process. It's a very messy process. Anytime you're dealing with honey, it gets absolutely everywhere. I also tell the story about learning to deal with the bees. They are numerous. The first times we did it was just absolute swarms of bees everywhere, where we had to learn that you bring them inside after the first frost. Otherwise, they're all in the building. But it's kind of cool to see all these different iterations and learn how just stuff as simple as you would think honey, maybe it seals the barrel really well. When in actuality, it's drying the barrel out so rapidly that you're having to compensate by adding moisture on the outside while the honey's in there. It's a very active process to go through it.
and not to mention it's also quite expensive because
Extremely expensive.
I think people really underestimate, myself included, how much how much honey it takes to fill a 53-gallon barrel and
Yeah,
how long you need to let the bees go or how many bees you need to do it
yeah.
faster.
Yeah, and that was the interesting thing is when we first did this, I would say more R&D scale. We were lucky enough to just solely use the local honey production, and then we started talking about okay, we're looking for X number of thousand pounds of honey, and they're like, that's more than we produce in the entire year. Like we can maybe get you a 53-gallon barrel full like a couple of times, but it's okay, then you've got to keep expanding to sourcing this honey from multiple locations plus the local. And what you realize at that point is there's a black market in honey, just like there's a black market in olive oil and other things. And to maintain that line of sight and certification throughout the process is a very extensive and very expensive process. And that's why real honey is very expensive. And it's really to make sure you don't veer into those black market products that are out there because there is a large amount of it.
For sure. And one of the questions I had was, are you able to still rely just on the local apiaries? And
Nope,
nope.
nope,
Which,
nope. Sadly not. I wish there were enough bees around here. We supplement them when they're getting their honey back on the barrels, but unfortunately, the thousands of pounds of honey that we're using at this point, there's nobody remotely locally that's able to source that all.
it makes total sense. It's I think about it, it's a reason that kind of the honey finish, everyone wants to do one, but not a lot actually have. Like,
Yeah,
and it's a funny coincidence, I guess, to me that you launched the first one in Memphis and Nashville,
yep,
because when I think of what started honey finish craze, it was the Belle Meade honey,
yep.
and maybe I think Starlight in Indiana did one as well. But the
Uh,
Belle Meade honey first release, and then the
oh yeah,
second one
that's
where it was a
early.
single barrel,
Yeah,
but it was only one barrel both
yep,
times,
yep.
and uh,
And that's back when you could justify the prices for it. There was the one barrel.
right, and the prices being justified were I think it was a 12-year product or something at maybe $120,
Yep, yep,
which that I'd still say a 12-year-old bourbon
yeah,
today, forget the finishing, a 12-year-old bourbon today for 120, people are still not going to be like an automatic no on that.
yep. I agree.
To look into it. Um, so with the so that's one aspect of the R&D that did work and has been able to scale, albeit on the scale of B scale.
Yes.
So uh when this episode goes live, I'll have my tasting notes for this. I will tell you just generally that I really did enjoy this. There's something about honey cask and rye that
Yeah.
goes so well, the sweet spicy thing. And if you've had Green River 95.5 rye, it's not
Yeah.
the super spicy 95
It's
rye
not.
to begin with, but it's got enough that
Yeah.
it cuts through the honey sweetness. Similarly, the honey sweetness cuts through that little bit of spice. And I just got like really strong, like a cinnamon graham cracker if you had multiple baking spices in there, so cloves
Mhm.
and nutmeg in there as well.
Yeah. Well,
And at about
and that was the big reason too. So we had done some various other finishes, and we all know rye is such a small subset category compared to bourbon's volume. But it was like even the original Belle Meade, that's bourbon finished in honey. It's like, okay, it's the sweet on sweet. Like we had a
exactly.
bourbon honey release too, but it was I want to do rye because you're gonna get that benefit of just like why you use rye in a cocktail to cut through some of the sweet ingredients. We're gonna use rye in these honey barrels and allow it to show up and stand on its own, where you get the
Mhm.
finish of the honey, but rye is still present.
Mhm.
And I think that's where so many of these finishes kind of go sideways is you don't allow the bourbon or the rye to still exist. It's whatever else is influencing it is either so distinctly separate or just overriding that a lot of people just generally assume rightly or wrongly that if you're blending or secondary finishing a product like that, it's starting out as something bad. It's like, well, if you start with something good and you go through the extensive process to make this turn out great, it really is a pretty unique and impressive product.
For sure. And uh, it's good tangent to ask. You've been very open that R&D doesn't always work.
No.
You know, there's plenty of things we know we try and it just doesn't work, and it could be for any number of reasons. Too old, too young,
Yeah.
weird finish didn't work, something was funky in there. Um, and you've said like you've had barrels that are not great, but then get saved later on. There are
Yeah.
ones that are kind of okay that you can blend in without uh, negatively affecting the final blend. And then there are ones you just can't blend out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes you are unlucky enough to come across those that it's bad. Every aspect of it just went completely bad. Age is just going to make it worse. And that's just kind of the unfortunate side of R&D is it doesn't always work for you.
so in your mind, and I don't know if this is quantifiable or even put in qualitative methods. Wow, that did not work out of my mouth. Quantitative or qualitative methods. Um, at what point do you and the team look at a barrel and say, you know what, this is just done. We're just going to dump this. Like there's no saving this one.
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of times we've never gone to we're just dumping this one. We'll just let it keep aging, and if it completely goes away, so be it. But it is interesting how you might have six people in a room, five out of six people are like, this is the worst thing I've ever had. And number six is like, I actually really like this. And it's like, please explain, like, what thing do you find appealing in this? And it is interesting. There's always that weird note that it always comes into, well, I think this is the worst thing ever, but maybe there's a blend I haven't even thought of 10 years down the road that this weird note might actually work on. And that's why it's like, we don't think there's any recovery, but you might find you are looking for this weird, funky note later on to balance something out that's overly neutral right now. So far, it hasn't worked for some of these barrels, but that's always the bright spot you're looking for.
Yeah, I like the idea of just kind of letting it go. There's really nothing,
Yeah,
especially since you're not paying the barrel tax.
yeah.
Going
I
back
mean,
to that,
for us, if we dumped it, then we're paying the federal excise tax on it. For us to just let it sit there, it's just sitting, evaporating, and over time, it's either still in the wood or it's gone.
right? And then if you got a barrel that's empty because it just evaporated, you're not gonna.
Yep,
It's nothing to pay for. So
yep,
in that sense, it's advantageous to let it go,
yep.
especially if you got the room. Which now, with the recently completed warehouse with the 30,000 barrels down the road, you
We're,
guys have more room.
we're still working to fill that one, but I hope it gets filled sooner than later. But the biggest thing for us right now is because the market's turned,
Mhm,
the purchasing of used cooperage has really cratered.
mhm.
So it's empty barrels take up as much room as full barrels. So trying to come up with anybody who wants to come and pick it up has gotten a little bit more complicated than a couple of years ago.
That's
But
true, and there's only so many furniture shops willing to take them.
and it's kind of been crazy to see the price points. So I always tell people, so pre-pandemic, you're talking 20 something bucks a barrel, full tractor trailer load of empties going up. Kentucky, Scotland, go down to tequila, Mexico for tequila. Pandemic, you're 200 plus for the exact same barrel that you're selling.
Mhm.
You come on the flip side of it, and it's headed towards the 20s to the I'm not really even interested in being a barrel buyer right now, and you're waiting for the barrel buying to start to come back. It's just seeing the ebbs and flows that we've gone through over the last 5 years is it's not just on the shelf, it's everywhere else.
For sure. And I want to pause on the products for a second because that brings up a question I was going to ask towards the end, but I think that's a good entry point, which is you mentioned the market is slowing. It's
Yeah,
slowing on the product side, it's slowing on the used barrels, everything is slowing.
yeah,
Not you use the word cratering, and for certain aspects of it, cratering is certainly the right word.
yeah.
It seems more so overall it's the exponential growth leveling out to a
Yes,
sustainable level. That
yeah,
necessarily means that some are going to fail, some are pausing to equalize, but it's not the industry itself is not creating
yeah.
quite
So
yet.
it's interesting. There's segments that ultimately have to crater, but there's the overall industry that, like you said, it's if you reverse out the purchasing trends, and I always say this, the purchasing trends versus the consumption trends, I think are probably pretty different. But if
Mhm.
you remove that parabolic peak during the pandemic, you sort of get to approximately straight line growth to where we're at today.
Right.
And it's also, we're talking about single digit declines across bourbon domestically.
Mhm.
So it's a big shift from having compound annual growth rates that were going up and up, but it's really more of a leveling off where you see the cratering is around the industry that was doubling and doubling and doubling every
Mhm.
component of their production and then realizing you didn't need to double anywhere close to that and you have to slam on the brakes. And that's where you've got the big fall off. And that's really on the production side of barrels. The need for some of this excess barrel inventory is where you've seen that sharp decline, which is far worse than what you've seen from the retail setting.
For sure. And you were, I think this was either on Whiskey Rocks or on this My Bourbon podcast that you talked about as things slow down, there's a significant lag time for the
Yeah,
producer to see that. Like you can know anecdotally because you're buying as a consumer yourself and you see things in the news, but I think you mentioned about a 6 month lag time between the retailer sees the slowing sales, they're going to hold out a bit to tell the distributor because they've got an interest to hold out on the distributor.
yeah,
The distributor is then going to hold out that interest when they learn about it. So
yeah,
by the time it gets back to you guys as the producers, yeah, it's 6 months down the line, and suddenly you
Yeah.
have to adjust on the fly to either a flood or sudden drought, depending on
Yeah.
the condition.
Well, I mean, it's you think about it, it's how does the traffic jam start? People in front of you hitting their brakes. By the time it gets to you, you're dead stopped and they're
Right.
starting to move again. But it's all that backlog you now have to clear through. And that's really what happened over the last, call it 12 to 24 months, depending on where you were in the cycle. And it's also important to look at where does it start at the retail? Because, like it or not, there are completely different segments of retail in this business. You've got the total lines of the world who are so focused on every aspect of information in their business, their ability to react is going to be much more aggressive than an independent retailer. They might
Right.
have similar customers going in, but Total Wine knows the second there's an issue.
Mhm.
Like an independent retailer that doesn't have the same level of inventory control, that the same level of information about their consumer, it might take them twice, three times a year longer to realize all these different aspects and what specific bottle, what specific category is having this. And for us, it was looking at some of those, I would say, more beneficial insights because we do have larger chain distribution as well as independents. And seeing some of those order flows and the indications from them when distributors weren't even talking about issues. And it's your sales force talking about they're hearing things, or you're walking into stores and you're just talking to store owners and they're not really saying something, but they're sort of saying something. And it's
Mhm.
just like staying on top of all those different indicators out there. But even doing that, you look at these publicly traded companies who have access to every bit of information well beyond what we could ever think of. And they're all like, we were completely caught off guard how quickly this thing changed on us. And
Mhm.
it's just the speed, I think, is what was different about this from previous changes in velocity across the spirits markets.
In the example of Total Wine is prudent as well, just because in here in New York we've got the largest by volume Total Wine
Yep.
in the country, because chain liquor stores are not allowed in New York.
Yep.
If you're an outside one, like if you have a chain outside of New York, you can only have one location in New York. So only one Total Wine. It's in the same parking lot as the number two Costco and the number three Walmart by volume, which makes that place an absolute pain in the ass to visit.
Yep.
Uh, and that's where I grew up. Anyway, the so I'd be interested to talk to that particular store to see what they saw. Because
Yeah.
of course, as you said, you have Total Wine as an example, has their entire network of stores
Yep.
across the country to see, what the data is showing them. But on a very hyper local level, what were they showing the same trends at a single store, albeit a high volume one, but a single store,
Yeah.
that they were in either some of the smaller stores or areas where they've got two of them within 10 miles of each other.
Yeah.
I'd be very curious to know that.
Well, and part of that too, what we did see is you had very different exposures to different states. Um, some states were extremely buffered from that, whereas others, they felt it very early on. Um, but yeah, it is really remarkable to see. I mean, since we're talking about Total Wine, they implemented what was their largest inventory reduction in history. They also put inventory buying freezes in place. And the thing that I don't think everybody realizes is there were freezes on purchasing product that were still selling. It just meant that they had to clear through a lot of the dead stock they had for cash flow reasons and other just inventory management reasons. It's like brands that had velocity got caught up in these cutbacks, and then luckily you're able to get them turned back on over time. But it
Mhm.
was just sweeping decisions were made, and then you had to go back and isolate the ones to bring it back where you should have.
Again,
Yeah,
and
I mean that's the
yeah.
thing is like the complexity you saw, and like some of the more advanced independent retailers they saw similar, but there's plenty of retailers that are new to the business. Like this is they bought the store in the middle of the pandemic. All they saw was year after year of just incredible sales, and then something changed, and they're like, I don't even know like what changed. One
Mhm.
day it was just completely different. And it's just, for some people, it really was. One day it was completely different.
Yeah. I saw it in September of 23. It was just this massive, massive yet quick, just
So it's funny
instant.
you say that. Um, September of 23, we had just one of our monthly sales meetings, and leading up to us, I mean, no, we're good, we're good. In September, it was, um, yeah, something's just different, and it's just, are your numbers there? Nope, numbers aren't there. It was just
Yeah.
crazy to see that.
So in we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to
Yeah.
have a couple more questions that I definitely want to get into. So we're going to put a pin in that part of the conversation, although I know there's so much more to dive into there. Um, I want to talk about a couple of other products, um, just in case we don't have time to mention it. We should say Blue Note is the official bourbon sponsor of Major League Pickleball.
Yes, we are.
And you can learn more about that in the interview with Tim Bipp, because I think it just happened about then. Um, but I wanted to jump back to products for a second. Uh, One of the I think the most well-known non-core range of yours now is the Crossroads.
Yeah,
Has a lot to do with Memphis. I love the idea like the Crossroads Blues and
yeah,
bringing the music notes into that, pun intended. Uh, so just like so many Blue Note products, Crossroads multiple award winner.
yeah.
Um, and you noted on when you were on Embellish Pod with my friend John that you use oak from a particular part of France. And then on your website, you've got that you use two different types of French oak. So I'd love to know what the details are there.
Yep. So ultimately, we work with one of the boutique subsidiaries of Speyside, sourcing two different types of French oak out of their French cooperage. Um, and what's interesting is when we first got into it, we were the largest consumer of French oak staves domestically. There was another brand that started doing a similar process about a year later, and then we completely changed up our ratios on the product that we were blending entirely. Um, but it was really cool to have Speyside involved in some of those early stages to taste through the product and to see how this was interacting with bourbon when their previous experience was almost exclusively on the wine side. But yeah, Crossroads is my go-to. It's my favorite 100 proof toasted French oak, and it's one that the proof sneaks up on you. There's nothing about it. It's the ridiculously overused term of smooth, but Crossroads is smooth. We also have found that even though bourbon predominantly leans towards male consumption, women are disproportionately drawn to Crossroads, which we found kind of an interesting way to expand the category. It's just allowed us a different way to sort of approach that one in tastings as well.
That's fascinating. I
Yep.
I'll be so I know I'm in the minority here. I enjoy Crossroads.
Yep.
For me, the French oak was a little too strong, a little too
Yep.
perfumey.
Yep.
Um, again, I know I'm in the minority in this because it's been so
It's fine.
well
That's what's
reviewed.
fun about bourbon. It's
Uh,
not. That's why you
yeah,
got different iterations of products.
exactly. And look, enjoyed I enjoy the rest of the Blue Note stuff so much that it's like I know it's not the underlying thing. It's just all
Yep.
right. I didn't like that application of French oak.
Yep.
Okay, I can live with that.
Yep.
And but with that, the and clearly with the other finishes, honey included, we know you can finish well. It's not about
Oh
your
yeah.
skill with finishing either.
Yep.
That was more also because I do tasting notes and I want to include that when I post the episode, and I didn't want you to look and be like, "Oh, he said he liked this, but the score is not like no."
No, that
Um,
that's what's so fun too with Crossroads because you're going to get some variability batch to batch.
mhm.
It is kind of fun. I've obviously got access to all of them just to see it, and that it's funny. There's one batch which is currently finishing right now, which CFO literally just brought up samples for everybody right before this. So that's what we're doing on a Friday afternoon.
Hey, I mean, if you come across one that where the French oak is a little less perfumey, like
Yeah.
for me, I'm okay with more of the spice and the toasted side of things. It was a little too perfumey on
Okay.
this one. I'm open to trying it again, and I'll point out that it's batch to batch. You're not trying
Yeah.
to be perfectly consistent.
Yep, there is a level of variability between it, but no,
Yeah,
I love getting feedback like that because it allows you to improve and adapt over time.
Exactly. And again, I
We're not stuck in our ways. If we were, we wouldn't exist today.
exactly. But this is, and it kind of goes back to Green River being your partner, that you have the consistency underlying everything.
Yeah.
That I, as a consumer, and I mean this, I can go up and buy a Blue Note bottle, regular release, uncut, and I'll expect that it's going to be good. Like
Yeah.
it'll match up with my palate. So having one product that I was like okay on versus the rest, not turning me off from it, and it should.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now with there's a different application that I have to ask you about because I know it hasn't been done yet, and you're still looking to try it, which is Green River. This was when it was still OZ Tyler, had a warehouse collapse in 2019,
Yes, they did.
and I saw a bottle of Blue Note uncut that came from barrels that had been in that warehouse,
Yeah.
and good lord, it looked like a 20-year sherried Scotch, like
Oh yeah.
chocolate dark, almost opaque.
Yeah.
Um, and it was not anywhere near that age. It was more in like the 3, 4, 5
Yeah.
year range.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on Whiskey Rocks last year that you were trying to find a cooper who would do a char 4 and then scrape barrels to
Yep.
replicate the warehouse collapse that knocked all the char loose
Yep.
into the liquid.
Yep.
And I have to ask first, if you've had any luck doing that, and two, the only other experience I've had like that was I was doing a pick at Jack Daniels with some friends of mine from a local bourbon group, and uh, we did my barrel, then we did a second barrel, then the third one. One of my friends like threw the stave, the not the stave, the
The
thief in
thief.
so
Uh-huh.
hard that it scraped the bottom and churned up all that char.
Yep.
And honest to God, I can't drink that without just feeling like I'm tasting ashes in my mouth. So first question being, have you had any luck finding a cooper who's willing to do that? And then second one being, what was the profile of that? Like, was it that kind of barrel ashy addition to it, or did it just make it darker and richer?
Yep. So the first question, nobody's jumped on the bandwagon yet for that, but I will say cooperages are getting a whole lot more flexible and open to requests now than they were a year ago. So we might be heading down that path, I hope, sooner than later. Um, the interesting thing about it was, I would imagine if you pulled the sample right after the collapse, you would have had that super just like char element to it. Because we let them age for years after the fact before we started to pull from them, I think a lot of that settled out. And ultimately, like it was different profiles came through, and I would say more accelerated aging, but nothing about it was, I would say, off-putting characteristics. And I think that's what was kind of cool to see was you ultimately expose different elements, so you got those different aging interactions. But like the char kind of still got to do what it was going to do, but that had all settled out by the time we went to dump those.
And I would think that makes sense. Like I said, the experience that I had, it was fresh scrape, so it
Yeah,
was
I mean,
all
and
all up in there.
yeah, and it is crazy, like from the color perspective, and we've even had some people request that we put char back into the bottles.
Mhm.
It's like it's not really our thing. Like we get it's kind of cool to look at, but
Mhm.
ultimately, like that, you're just gonna mess with like that carbon element. It's just gonna not be what you're actually looking for when you're drinking. It's fun, but it's not an everyday item.
It's yeah, it's very taste dependent.
Yeah.
Have you had any Blackadder raw cask scotches?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so those are put out by a friend of the podcast, multiple time guest and recent guest talking about tariffs, Raj Sabharwal, and the idea is that it's as unfiltered as you can possibly get. So you do get char and sediment in
Mhm.
bottles, and um, I see what you mean. Like if there's too much of it or certain elements, it can really change the flavor.
Yeah.
But they choose certain, call it barrels or even bottles. I'm not even sure how granular they go on this, and it adds something extra to it.
Interesting.
It can be extra mouthfeel, extra texture, something.
Yeah.
Um, but that's also we're talking those are scotches,
Hmm.
a couple of rums as well. So we're talking used cooperage, which is going to be a lot different. Like that's going to be kicking up some wood and sediment, not fresh char.
Yeah.
But that's definitely
Interesting.
something to check out, though. I
Yeah.
highly
No, it is
recommend that
interesting.
series. All right, so 10 minutes left. We got speed round, couple of questions. Not really speed round, but just a couple questions. Uh,
Rapid-ish fire.
Rapidish fire. So uh, there, there's a question I'm going to ask you, and this is something you said on Embellish Pod, and I'm dying to ask because I know it's going to be divisive,
Oh
and that's not
gosh.
my usual type of questioning. Clearly, so John had asked you, you're doing the bourbon, you're doing the rye. Was American single malt something that had been on your radar? And you said, not really. You're doing fine with the products that you have, and there's plenty of room to grow there without diversifying to a third one. And then you added on that you felt like the American single malt was driven more by cooperage and cooper's needs rather than consumer desire.
Yep.
So should be noted that doesn't you did not say it was bad. You did not say anything
Nope.
like that.
I
But
think the expansion was driven by that dramatically. I mean, you look at it. So you have a couple of producers that have been around for a while. So you had Stranahan's out in Colorado. You had Virginia Distilling, and largely they had pretty much been stuck in the same consumer base for a while. It hadn't really grown much. I think the acceleration was driven by the fact that you had distillers that were still capable of distilling that didn't have access to any barrels. So they faced the issue of, do you shut down or you do use these used barrels you got around? Well, American Single Malt gave you that option. And I think that really was the impetus for a lot of these people getting into it. Just like anything, not everything is great, not everything is bad. You're going to have all kinds of different geographic influences that go with it. But I think it would be interesting if you could reverse out the cooperage shortage. Would American single malt be anywhere close to where it is today? I can't imagine it would. And it's also like you're looking at a whole lot of different influences from the ability to get scotch in and out of the US. A lot of these other things were going on at the same time. And you also had some level of palate fatigue. So people were like open to the idea of trying out something that's different. Maybe they weren't ready for scotch, but American single malt was sort of that opportunity to get into it. For whatever reason, people still don't want to touch rye, but American single malt might be the thing that brings them back to rye. But yeah, I think that was definitely one of the accelerating components of American single malt for sure.
it's to me it was an interesting exploration to go into, and I got a couple of writers I can think about that could make a really good story about that to try to
Yeah.
back out, do a
Well, I mean,
hypothetical of that.
yeah, because like there are, I would say, largely it's just large scale producers. I'm pretty sure Bullet is using new cooperage, but outside of that, it is largely used cooperage that they're using for their American single malts.
Yeah, I mean, in talking with producers, because we've talked to a lot of American single malt producers, whether exclusively ASM or as part of their portfolio, and
Yeah,
I know now we have the formal recognition and rules, but the cooperage was always a question because the question of tradition, where like Scottish, Irish, where they're using the used bourbon barrels,
yeah,
so that's the tradition of the single malt versus the American, uh, the thing that makes them American being using new American oak
yeah,
and how the
yeah,
balance could work. So that again, I think that could be a really interesting study in the dynamic of how American single malt grew.
yeah.
Uh,
No, that's just my thoughts, but I'm
hey,
all open to somebody digging into it. Prove me wrong or prove me right. Either way, it's interesting.
hey, again, you didn't say it was good, bad.
Ah,
It's all over the range.
it
Uh,
is.
so, uh, so just looking in the last few minutes, looking to the future of Blue Note. As your appearance in on the Whiskey Rocks in 2024,
Yep.
uh, at that point you had just secured 20 million in financing. You were about to finish the buildup that you're now at to 110,000 square feet
Yep.
total between the two locations. Even a year ago to now, as we've talked about multiple times, not an easy time to raise funds or to expand. Um, but from what I have seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you guys have been able to have a fairly standard growth, linear growth continuing.
Yeah.
along this line.
Yeah.
So, looking at it from a perspective of being in the industry and seeing what's going on from the industry, what do you feel has uh, permitted Blue Note to continue growing at that linear rate while others
Yeah.
are pausing, faltering, and facing other challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most basic is capital. We're lucky enough to have an investor base that can support us as we've gone up, down, and sideways over the last year. I'd say we have great relationships with some of our banking partners and everybody we work with too on the production side. If you sat back and think you were going to get through it without changing stuff, you were definitely caught flat-footed. I mean, we've made changes across every aspect of our business. And we've been lucky enough that those have all been, I would say, beneficial changes. We're also in a position going into this that we weren't everywhere. So we had the ability to grow geographically and just minimize some of this negative impact we would be exposed to if we were a fully expanded and international brand. And I think it's also we benefited from some of the more like fundamental things we had set up years ago. It's we had products at a price point that could weather some of these storms, and we didn't chase the consumer when things went parabolic. And not only did we not lose consumers to the $100 bottles, but we didn't piss off distributors, retailers along the way. And it's being able to maintain that channel, I would say, just visibility of encouraging people to continue to buy your product, maintain the velocity, has been super beneficial. And to be recognized by some of our large retail partners along the way. I mean, we're a company with 20 people, but you can find us in retail accounts that you wouldn't dream of. And it's like when we're picked up by major retailers, it's not just tests, it's you go full scope expansion with them. And like all those different things, is it luck? Is it hard work? Is it all of it? Yes, it really is, and flexibility. And I think having a team that's willing to be flexible through all of that, as long as, like I said, the investors to support you through it, is really what's sort of set us apart from the overall trajectory that's out there.
And just to add a note onto that, I don't know what the local market is like in Memphis. I know I talked about it with old Dominic. That was almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm so before the market started falling, or just when it was about to fall. Uh, you have spoken about how you didn't want to expand too far. Like you wanted to go deeper into markets as opposed to going too wide.
Yeah.
So right now, last I heard, you're focusing clearly Tennessee, Georgia, Colorado was kind of the western expansion, but a lot in the southeastern and northeastern
Yeah.
U.S. Is that still the plan for now? Stay the course.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we've added some more markets as fill-in throughout the Midwest, but it really is driving those volume in some of these key markets as opposed to being everywhere. And for us, it's expanding the sales team and our ability to support those markets. But yeah, I mean, Memphis is a very interesting market to be our hometown. It is probably one of the most aggressive priced locations in the entire country. And what I mean by is if there's an allocated product, it's probably going to be available here. It's going to be available at a very cheap price point. If you're looking for a product, something like Buffalo Trace, I was just up in Massachusetts last week. It's 40, $50 on the shelf.
Mm.
It's $26 or cheaper here, 100K stacks.
Wow.
Like Memphis is the testing ground for so many products at such aggressive price points. It's like, okay, normally you're like, okay, you've got the hometown advantage. You're just
Mhm.
free sailing. No, we're going up against Sazerac, Brown Forman, and they are cutting it out on the shelf to drive that consumer spend. Yeah, it's a very interesting hometown environment to live through.
I know we're at time, but if you'll permit me, I got to ask the
Yeah.
follow-up questions. Why
Why?
is Memphis the testing ground?
So there's a lot of like historical significance between I would say liquor stores and demographics here to some of the Kentuckies across some of the distilleries across Kentucky, Tennessee. It's a market where brands can test stuff out for an incredibly minimal spend relative to like some of the other national markets. And it's close enough where Kentucky and Tennessee can fight it out because Memphis, even Tennesseans think Memphis isn't in Tennessee. Like we're literally the forgotten corner that people come here and I mean we're also between like Sazerac headquarters in New Orleans, so they can slam
Mhm.
everything together, and we're the meeting point of a lot of this. It really is fascinating when you hear the people that have been in the industry for 40 plus years talk about all the connections and how so much stuff channeled through this city.
It's all about the
Yep,
Mississippi, man.
yep, it is.
It's probably more one of the interstates now, but it's used to be through all through the Mississippi.
All through the
Uh,
Mississippi now. It's the FedEx planes flying overhead,
yes,
but
that's true. The Memphis hub. Yeah.
yep.
Oh man. I know we could go more, but Logan, thank you so much for coming on, talking Blue Note, even talking Blue Run for the 30 seconds that I brain farted on that. But talking Blue Note and the different products you got out, I'm really looking forward to posting my tasting notes for not only the core products, but also this honey cask rye.
Yep.
Really, really enjoyed it. And I hope to, I know you've got some special release that comes out each year.
Yep.
That one's harder for me to get to, but we'll see if I can make a trip down next year.
Candidly,
Um,
version 3 is living on my desk right now in some form of blending. Literally, this side
yeah,
of the screen is all the
yeah,
bottles.
I I believe it. I mean, it's going to take time. Last year was it was 10 barrels, 10
Yep.
different finishes,
Yep.
3 states like that. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's not
Um,
one day's blending. That's a
no,
lot of going back and forth.
exactly. So hang on with me for just a sec after we finish recording.
Yep.
Uh, Thank you everyone for listening. Listen to the end notes for where you can find more information. Go to the show notes for this episode under the description, wherever you listen to your podcast, to get not only the notes for this episode, but also tasting notes and any other information I can provide. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you all next week.